resource person will be joining as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This is Dr. Amrita from PG and Research Department of Social Work. I welcome each and every participant. Just now I spoke to the resource person. She's having some connectivity issues and she'll be joining within few minutes. So kindly hold on, dear participants. Thank you. So, dear participants, until the resource person joins, let me highlight some of the important points that needs to be taken care. For any of the virtual session, we are supposed to follow certain rules and regulations, which helps in the smooth functioning of the meeting. Likewise, in this session, I request every one of you all not to switch on your audio and video, and please do your questions, do text your questions in the chat box, which will be clarified at the end of the session. There is a particular question and answer session which is being allotted, so your questions will be taken up during that session. And after the program gets over, you will be given a feedback link, which you are asked to fill that link carefully, and after that you will be getting your certificate in your email. Okay, and regarding this webilog on understanding the cognitive functions for co-building social transformation is being organized with two objectives in mind. So I'll just give you a highlight about the objectives. The first objective is to find out the thoughts and mental processes which is influencing our actions, which is leading to social transformation. And the second objective is we are trying to know the techniques so as to maximize our cognitive ability. So, keeping both these objectives in mind, we have invited the resource person for today. She is Miss Niranjana. She is a clinical neuropsychologist from Madurai. When ma'am joins in, we'll quickly start the session. So thank you participants for your cooperation and joining us. Surely you'll be having a greater insights at the end of the session. Thank you. Dear participants, the resource person have joined us. She is in the name Gautam. Welcome, ma'am. So we'll start with the session. Happy morning and warm greetings, everyone. The PG and Research Department of Social Work, Kaveri College for Women, Tiruchirappalli, has the pleasure in welcoming each and every student participant, the resource person, my own colleagues, academicians, and practitioners for this webinar on understanding the cognitive functions for co-building social transformation. So, dear knowledge partners, we have already had a look about the objectives. So, I'll just reinstate the objectives so as to have a greater idea about with what objectives we are going to be in the session. So, the first objective is about to understand the thoughts and mental processes which is going to influence our actions, and subsequently which is going to lead for a social transformation process. And the second objective is we are going to know the techniques from the resource person so as to maximize our cognitive abilities. So to help us to understand these objectives, we have with us Ms. Niranjana, clinical neuropsychologist from Madurai. Madam is a director of an organization named Kondatam, which offers psychological services, and it is involving itself in research activities. So, ma'am is a director since 2017. Our resource person has also earned 2 master's degree, one in social work and the other in applied psychology. She has also did her MPhil in clinical psychology at National Institute for Empowerment of Persons with Multiple Disabilities. She has qualified her UGC NET both in social work as well as in psychology. Her fields of interest include neuro rehabilitation, cognitive retraining, behavior therapy, psychoanalysis, positive psychology, and research and statistics. She has an expertise in working among people having neurological, psychiatric, and geriatric conditions, and also with children having special needs. She offers consultation services to special schools, NGOs, as well as to government schools. Madam is also being invited for guest lectures and motivational seminars in various schools and colleges in and around India. So we are very glad and excited to have you, ma'am, amongst us. And we are about 91 in number, and being connected virtually is really excited. And we are here to know about the mental processes that is influencing our actions.
Thoughts, experiences, and the senses that we undergo. So when we think more about cognition, it is definitely a mental action or a process, and this is important for acquiring knowledge and understanding about not only our own selves but also the surrounding environment. So now when we talk about this cognition, let us try to understand how this cognition develops. The next slide is cognitive development is the emergence of the ability to think and understand, and it's the process by which people's thinking changes across the lifespan. So as I already told you, it's through years from our childhood onwards till today. We are completely different in all of our ways, in all the domains of our life. Our thoughts have changed, our emotions has changed, our idea or opinion about everything around us has changed. For example, how we think about objects has changed. What is our understanding about relationship has changed. Name any type of relationship. It can be any relationship. It can be the relationship between parent and the child, or the relationship between a teacher and a student, or the peer relationship, or the interpersonal relationships that we have with other people around. So every nature of the relationship has actually, the meaning of it, the understanding of the relationship has changed through years. When we were 5-year-old kid, how we relate to people is very different, and when we were 13-year-old, how we related to the outside world was different, and today the thoughts and emotions that's running inside you is completely different. So this cognitive process is a constant, and it's a ever-changing process. And in fact, this emotion This emotion also is influenced by our cognition. Definitely, when maybe like you can think in your own life, whatever emotions we undergo, just imagine when the same emotion, maybe for example, if we take fear, when we were a 7-year-old kid, we would have really few people would have really so scared for a dog that runs, that uh, that is approaching you, running towards you so fast. But today, when that same dog runs towards you, what would you do? You may not fear that much. You will be able to stand, look at it, and say, "Go away." So this fear emotion, how did this emotion change to the same object? The dog running towards you so fast is the same instance that happened when you were 7-year-old and today when you are 20-year-old. So what's the difference that happened there? How this emotion changed, or how the intensity of the emotion changed? It is because of our understanding about the dog, understanding about how dogs will react, understanding about why the dog is actually running towards you. When all these understanding or the thinking or the knowledge of all these aspects develop in us, automatically the emotional component associated with the same incident changes across the lifespan. So this cognitive process is a very significant process in every human being, in every individual. How far the cognitive ability or the cognitive skills develop, enhance through the lifetime, accordingly the quality of life is determined, the quality of the relationship we have with the world is determined, and our performance, our productivity, and overall the meaning that we get in life, what meaning we have in life also is determined by the level of cognitive development that happens inside us. So this cognitive development is a field of study in neuroscience and psychology, focusing on child's development in terms of information processing, conceptual resources, perceptual skills, language learning, and other aspects of brain development. So as we were discussing, the overall development of a human being is determined by the level of cognition that's happening inside the person. Madam, hello, are you all with me? Can I get some feedback from you?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I see the second, third slide, we have not gone to the third slide.
Yes, ma'am. You want me to go to the third slide, ma'am?
Yeah, we are already done with the third. We'll go to the fourth.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So among the areas of cognitive development, we have different domains like information processing, intelligence, reasoning, language development, and memory. These are the different components in our brain that contribute to the cognitive development of a human being, any individual. So when our language develops, when our memory develops, when our intelligence and reasoning skills improve, automatically our cognition about the entire world, like world in the sense about oneself and the others, also improve. So here the important thing that we need to understand is the interpersonal and the social emotional context in which cognitive development unfolds is very important. So as social workers, it's always like we deal with not just one particular individual, we deal with a community, we deal with a group of individuals. So when we talk about group of individuals, we definitely know each individual is unique, and each individual has not only unique in nature, but they relate to each other. The human life is determined by how we relate with each other. So the interpersonal skills and the social living, the social relationships are very important in determining the emotional content and the and how the quality of life is determined. So when we see an infant developing, when the child is born and it gradually grows, it turns into a young child and then into adolescence, then it comes to adulthood. So in this process of development or growth, parents, family members, friends, teachers, and caregivers play a vital role. They play a vital role in supporting the cognitive development of the infant. To give an example, just imagine the scenario that was there existing before 20 years and the scenario that's existing today for a newborn infant. Before 20 years, when there is a newborn child in the family, just imagine how many people would come and look at the child. In the first 1 month period, one child is born and the child is now becoming 30 days old child. It's just 1 month the child is being born and it's there in the home, it's there in the family. So definitely before 20 years, by that 30-day period, the child would have sensed the touch of a minimum of 30 people, 30 new people. Minimum of. Maybe it could be even more than that. In certain families, it could be even 60 or 70 new members. But in today's scenario, when the child is born and the child is now 1 month child, like 30 days old child, how many new people had touched the child? Has the child sensed different or many new people's the touch, their voice, the emotional sharing? Because the child can actually bond emotionally, even though the child doesn't know the language, it cannot even see clearly. Till 30 days, the child actually cannot have a clear sight. The images are not clear. It has a very blurred and vision, and it can't see the world clearly. It can just see the movements and the colors. Even then, the facial recognition has not come, but still the child can sense the touch of the people who are lifting the child, who are talking to the child, and who are taking care of the child's needs. Like when you change the clothes of the child, when you give a bath to the child can sense the touch. The child can sense the emotion of that adult handling the child through their touch and through their voice. This emotional bonding happens right from the day, even before the child is born, it starts, but from even with the mother it starts. But after the child is born, right from the day it's born, this emotional attachment or the emotional bonding starts happening. So when we think of 20-year back scenario, a newborn infant had a different exposure or an experience of the world, external world. But today's infants, they have a very different experience or exposure of the external world. Why are we talking all this now? Because from day one onwards, the touch, the voice, the external climatic condition or the temperature of the external environment, everything has an impact on the brain development. It has an impact on the child's development of their brain. The neuronal connections. We would have known about the neuronal connections, like the entire body is made up of cells, and the brain and the spinal cord are the two organs where we call the cells of these two organs as neurons. They have a different structure and they do a different function. That is why it is called the central nervous system. The brain and the spinal cord put together, the cells of these two organs are called neurons, and these neurons have different structure and function when compared to the cells in the rest of the body. So this neuronal formation, neuronal connections made right from the day one of the child's birth determines how the cognitive development, how the emotional development and the social development of the child is going to be for its entire lifespan. So that is how even our own cognitive, emotional and social development has happened till this day. We belong to a different age group. Participants who are all here, we belong to different age groups. Definitely for each one of us, we are not same, right? Hope we all agree that each one of us are unique and different. So our emotional, cognitive, social relationships, or the developments that has happened inside us as a person was determined from the day one of our birth. So this brain formation, the brain, what happens in the brain is neuronal connections happen in the brain. These neuronal connections are the determining factors for how a person will behave, how a person will think, how a person will feel meaning emotionally, how they will feel, how they will respond to the world, how they are going to understand life, how they are going to perform in their job, or how they are going to perform in their life, what type of skills they are going to have. Everything is determined by the neuronal connections that's happening inside our brain, which starts from day one of our birth. So that is why when we talk about cognitive development, the parents, family members, friends, teachers, and caregivers play a vital role in supporting the cognitive development of infants. And it is important that they provide an healthy interpersonal and social emotional context. So, okay, maybe in the further slides, I'll also explain what kind of negative impacts can happen when the infant is not provided a healthy interpersonal and social emotional context. What kind of deprivation can happen in the child? We'll discuss it in the further slides. So now, when we can we go to the next slide? Research shows cognitive functioning is a significant predictor of social functioning. Today's research has shown that social functioning is determined by the cognitive functioning. And cognitive functioning, when we say, in other words, it is also called as executive functioning. Yeah, the next slide, yes. One slide before. Madam, it's a fourth slide, madam. The fifth. I can see on the screen that the slides are scrolling. Can we fix it on the fifth slide? Next one, madam. Yeah. So now I'd like to introduce another terminology to you. The previous one, madam. It's a fifth slide. Yeah, I would like to introduce a new terminology also to you called the executive functioning. Cognitive functions an important segment of cognitive functions is the executive functions. The next one, executive functions. The next one, madam. Yeah. So, in order to understand the executive function, let's just try to see the definition or the explanation about what is executive function. It is a unified term for cognitive processes that regulate, control, manage other cognitive processes such as planning, working memory, attention, problem solving, verbal reasoning, inhibition, mental flexibility, task switching, and initiation and monitoring of actions. Maybe all this will be complicated, but even though you need not know each term in detail, the overall, if you see all these terminologies that you see on the screen, each one it defines the mental processes that's happening inside us. Attention ability, problem solving. Just imagine when we do a problem solving work. How do we solve a problem? In everyday day-to-day life, maybe just imagine like we have to make a decision of whether you have to travel today by bus or an auto. So that is something you have to decide, and you decide that you will go by a bus, and then you find that you have already missed the timing, so you can't take the bus. Now that become a problem is created now. You decided to go by a bus, but the timing has been delayed, so you can't take a bus. Now you have to go by some other means of transport. Now this problem situation has to be processed by our mind, by our brain, and we have to find a solution to it. So this is a very simple everyday occurrence. In our day-to-day life, this type of instances happen very frequently. We do n number of decision making and problem solving in a day. Whether we know it or not, in a day we do numerous decision makings and problem solving every minute in a day. So like when we are making a decision, or when we are when we are solving a problem, what happens inside our brain is what we have to understand. There are many processes that happen inside the brain. When we have to solve a problem, initially we need to understand what are all the factors involved in it. We have to know the meaning of each of the factor, and we need to know whether each factor will be contributing to the problem or not. So these are the segments of problem solving. For example, if you have to take an auto now, and then you should know whether you should have the contact number of the auto, or you should be able to know whether on this road the autos will be available in this particular timing. Is it appropriate to choose or appropriate to decide to take an auto? Is it the right time for you to wait for an auto, or it is better that you walk a few distance and try to go to the next road, so that the autos will be there frequently available? So all these, what are all these things? These are the information and the knowledge that's available inside us. So for every task, there are n number of processes happening inside the brain, and these processes has to integrate with each other. When you are in a new place, definitely you will not know the frequency of the autos coming on that road. Definitely you will not know how safe is to take an auto at that particular point of time. So again, all these information are required for us to make a decision or a problem solving. So when you read all those concepts, planning, working memory, attention, problem solving, verbal reasoning, inhibition, mental flexibility, task switching, and initiation and monitoring of actions. Task switching is a very significant function that's happening in our brain. The same example that I gave you, we would have come across people who get upset when they miss the bus. They will not be able to take the next decision. They will be just stuck there, or they will get freezed there. They can't think of the alternative. They do not know how to choose or think of the next alternative and move on. Definitely we all would have seen people around us, or sometimes we ourselves would have been in such a situation. So task switching is something where our mental processes become more flexible. When the mental processes are rigid, we can't move on to the next option. We can't accept the reality. We get stuck up where we are. So these type of when these type of functions inside the brain gets affected, or when those functions are not well developed, what happens? The person will have a lot of difficulties in their life. They might have kind of problem with their own self. They can have problem with their own emotions, their own performance, their own skills. They will have problem with interpersonal relationship. They will have problem with performance. They will have difficulty in performance, in their work performance. And also what happens, sometimes these type of issues will lead them into severe mental illness. The extreme level of it can even lead them into severe mental illnesses. Though there's a very small function in the brain, but it's a very significant function. So when we have to understand executive functioning, it's not just one function. It is a unified term that is given for the cognitive processes that's happening inside our brain, which regulate, control, and manage our entire thought process. This is what we need to understand. We'll go to the next slide. So executive functioning is a theorized, sorry madam, the previous one. Executive functioning is a theorized cognitive system in psychology that controls and manages other cognitive processes. So as I told you, the other small or the segments of the cognitive processes are actually governed or controlled by the major functions, major cognitive functions like working memory, task switching, planning, decision making, etc. Responsible for, and these executive functions are responsible for the processes that are also referred to as executive skills, attentional system, cognitive control, etc. These are the terminologies which actually mean the same. It doesn't differ a lot. It's just for your understanding. Whenever you go for further references or materials when you read, these terminologies mean more or less the same. So the overall idea that you need to have is, every minute inside our brain there are numerous neuronal connections happening, and there are numerous cognitive processes constantly happening. Whether we are aware of it or not, constantly our brain is at work. It never rests. Even when we are sleeping, it never rests. So many neuronal processes are happening in our brain, and the output of these processes are our emotions, our behaviors, our words that we speak, our thoughts, emotions, our behaviors are the output of all these neuronal processes that are happening inside our brain. This is the overall understanding that you might need to understand more about social transformation. How cognitive functioning is going to aid or assist social transformation. We'll move on to the next. Yeah, here you will see a few definitions. We need not go into the definition, but just to know this executive functioning, what are the main areas that has been addressed through executive functioning in our day-to-day life, in an individual's behavior, in an behavior of a group. When groups of individuals are together, what are the determinants of their thoughts, what are the determinants of their behavior, what are the determinants of their emotional context. In order to understand that, just we can go understand about the executive functioning. So executive functioning is like, it is goal-oriented behavior. Each of the segments of the functioning, like inhibition is one particular brain function that comes under executive functioning. So as you see, executive functioning means inhibition, planning, mental representation, task switching, planning, decision making, and attention ability, memory, working memory, all these put together are executive functions. So when each of these functions is well developed, what happens is the particular individual will have a healthy outlook towards the world. They will have a healthy mental picture about the world. They will be able to have a healthy thought process. Their behaviors, actions, and the words will be in line. So they will be able to live a very contributive life to the society. They will become a healthy individuals in the society. So at a larger context, their outward behaviors are seen, but these outward behaviors are determined by these minute, very, very specialized kind of functions that's happening inside our brain. So this inhibition is something very essential. For example, hope we all understand the meaning of inhibition. Inhibition is something which you prevent yourself from doing. For example, you're in a meeting hall and somebody cracks a joke. Okay, so how do we respond to it? Do we respond in the same way like how we respond when we sit before the TV in your home? Definitely no. We might laugh at the joke, we might enjoy it, but the response that we make will be definitely different from how we enjoy a comedy in a television in our home. So that is inhibition. Though the particular humor, the humor of the brain comes out. Yes, when somebody cracks a joke, definitely the humor sense inside us will come up with some outward behavior. but how we are going to determine this behavior, whether we are going to completely expose the behavior, or are we going to choose how I'm going to respond to the behavior. So there comes inhibition. There is in the frontal region of the brain, what we call as the forebrain. That brain area is responsible for inhibition. So inhibition is one of the cognitive function in the brain, which will help us to determine our behaviors. So for people who have less of inhibition, when their frontal area of the forebrain has not developed adequately, when there is a problem in the inhibition ability, what happens is the person may not really know how to respond according to the external environment. Sometimes when they are standing in the railway station, they might laugh aloud so that the entire crowd will look at them. They may not realize what they are doing because for them the inhibition ability is less. So as social workers, we would often come across such type of difficult scenarios. Like we will be put in a place where we have to understand such type of people, handle them, try to kind of rehabilitate them. So it is not just because they don't understand, it's because internally their brain function has some inadequate development. So what is our role here would be, it's not that we have to advise them. When we tell them, see, everybody are looking around, it's not good to shout aloud and laugh. They may not understand because the inhibition ability itself is difficult. They will understand. Whatever you say, they will understand, and they will really want to do it. They really want to not repeat it in the next occasion. But what happens when the next occasion happens, since this inhibition ability is lacking in the brain, they again respond in the same manner. It's not because they didn't understand, it's not because they didn't decide to follow your instruction. They would have decided to follow your instruction. They would have understood the negative impact of such odd behaviors. But still what happens, because of the lack in ability inside the brain, they would have again done the same behavior outside. So in this manner, our executive functioning of the brain impacts every behavior and every move of the individual in their day-to-day life. So as we see in the last column, executive functions helps in goal-oriented behavior, self-regulation, and the adaptive functions, and it rule-governed behavior, and it conflicts with automatic or ongoing behavior. These are the overall functions of the executive functioning system in our brain. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. There are a few definitions which may not be that important for us. We'll go to the next. Yeah. Here, these just, yeah, we'll go to the next. Neurological model of self-regulation. Yes. Here, what is important for us to look here is the slide is not totally visible, madam. The lower half and the upper, the first line of the slide is not visible. Hello. Yeah. So why is self-regulation important? When it comes to social transformation or when it comes to social living, individuals form the society. So each individual contributes to our social life. So what's happening inside the individual now is very important. So that what are the contributive factors for self-regulation? We would have seen people who are really self-disciplined, who are self-regulated, and we also come across people who really don't have self-discipline or self-controlled behaviors. They always need somebody to control them, or they need some system to control them. They need to have some instructions and rules and regulations put up in front of them so that they will follow it. They may not have that self-regulatory behaviors. All these are combinations of people that we come across in our day-to-day life. Even in families we see, right? Even the siblings who are born in the same family, they don't grow alike. They don't live, they don't respond in a similar manner. Each one have their own interest, their own way of responding to responding in life. So what determines? So when it comes to self-regulatory behaviors, something inside our brain is contributing to this self-regulatory system. For those people who the self-regulatory system has been well developed in their brain, when the neuronal connections in the brain area which is responsible for the self-regulation is stronger, those people will exhibit a very good self-regulatory behaviors outside, like externally. For those people whose neuronal connections are very weak in the area of the brain which is responsible for self-regulation, then their external behaviors will be not in alignment to the societal norms. It will become a little bit deviant from the societal norms. So what is the internal mechanism that's happening inside that particular individual? So behavioral inhibition, as I was talking to you earlier, if you see the first on the top, it is the behavioral inhibition. What is contributing to this behavioral inhibition is working memory, self-regulation of the affect means emotion, and internalization of speech, reconstitution. These are the sub-processes that's happening inside our brain, which influences the behavioral inhibition. And finally, how our behaviors are seen outside is through the motoric control. How do we exhibit our behavior? Through the movement of the body. Yes, either we move our hands and legs, or we talk, or we behave by movement we exhibit our behaviors. So these are the internal mechanisms that's actually determining each of our actions. Whatever we think, whatever we experience, whatever we talk, whatever emotion we feel, every part of our external experiences has a strong internal mechanism in our brain. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Here, if you see, it's about self-integration, self-generation, self-control, self-realization, self-determination. And when you see the subheads of that, these are the processes. We may not go into deep depth about it and understand it. It's more of psychology. But what we have to understand here is all these self-control, self-realization, self-regulation, self-determination, all of these has a very strong and very intense internal functions inside the brain. There is a mechanism which is very strong, where the foundation of that internal mechanism has started from the early childhood. From birth onwards, this mental mechanism slowly got constructed, and till date, whatever the age of the individual is now, till now, that particular mechanism has become more and more reinforced and more strengthened, and thereby their behaviors externally also. So many a times we think like, why these people don't have self-realization? Don't they know? Don't they kind of understand how their behaviors are impacting others? Or even when it comes to alcohol addiction, we often wonder why these people, like they actually spoil their own health. We always wonder like why these people don't understand all of these impacts. Why are they not able to realize all these? So it is not only to do with the awareness or the knowledge part of the individual. It is something more. It is something more to be understood. Internally in the brain, there are so many processes which actually decides or determines the self-realization and their self-control. There are yet other numerous processes in the brain. So the ability of the brain or the neuronal system is very essential for us to understand, so that we understand the outward behavior of an individual. The next slide, self-activation. Yeah. So self-activation is the initiation and ramping up of basic executive functions related to an awakened state of mind and to overcoming sleep inertia. So this self-activation is something which has to, there is a particular, all that you have to understand is there is a particular area in the brain for self-regulation, for self-activation. This is what you need to overall understand. You need not understand the technicalities of it or the in-depth the meaning of it. Just we need to understand for each of these important complex functions like self-control, self-regulation, all these are complex functions. For all of these complex functions, there are numerous mechanisms in the brain that is responsible for all of these. We'll move on to the slide. EF development. We'll go to the 11th slide. We'll go to the 11th slide. Next slide, madam. It is about EF development, executive functioning development. That's a graph. That's a graph. Second slide, I'm sorry. I can't see it on my phone here. Yeah. So when you see the slide, there is a graph which shows the immature skills and the mature function. So down the x-axis is the age in years. So how this executive function develops, as I was telling you, the key of the graph has the types or the name of the executive functioning. Cognitive flexibility, the task switching which I told is called cognitive flexibility. Inhibitory control, what we were talking about, inhibition. Working memory, goal setting and problem solving, theory of mind. All these are the different dimensions or domains of executive functioning. So how this executive functioning develops from young age onwards. As you see in the graph, from when the child is 4-year-old, the executive functioning are not yet matured. The skills are immature, and as and when the age increases, gradually these functions mature. So the cognition of the child develops gradually from birth onwards. From 0 to 2 years, they sense the external world and understand the external world only by their sensory and motor skills. From 2 years onwards, they start thinking. Images form in their brain. We'll go to the next slide now. Images form in the brain. They start making internal representation of the external world. Whatever they see outside, there is a representation happening in the inside of the person. For example, if I say you an ocean. When I say you an ocean, you can see the image of an ocean in your brain. Though the ocean is not right in front of your eyes, you are able to imagine the picture of an ocean or the sight of the ocean. So this is the internal representation of the external reality. Whatever we see in the external world, our brain has an internal reference, internal representation. So as the child grows, from 2 years onwards, slowly the internal representation happens. Can you tell me what is the image of a language? What is the symbol for language? When we say language, the symbol of a language is the alphabets, or the script of the language is the symbols. So when a child learns language, the symbols of the language goes and stores in the brain. Thereby, for a developing brain, when the child is slowly developing, the developing brain can actually absorb a lot of new learning. how many languages you teach for the child will be able to grasp all of it. But when the child has become an adult and then we teach them a new language, it's very tough for them to learn a new language. Why? Because when the child's brain is now in the growing stage, then the neuronal connections is not yet been freezed. It's still like it is still being like a what you say, when the clay is wet, you can mold it in any way, but when it becomes hard, we can't mold it. Like that, the neuronal connections are flexible, the neuronal connections are loose, they have not become rigid, they have not become freezed. So what happens, how many new connections it wants to make, the neurons can make. So whatever mental representation has to be done of the external world from childhood onwards, gradually the cognitive ability develops. And how far the cognitive ability develops, that is how the person is going to be in their future, in their adulthood. Yeah, we'll move to the next slide, madam, because like we are running short of time. We'll move to the next slide. There is a slide named brain behavior relationship. We'll go there. Yeah, because these slides are more of technical aspects. Yeah. Can you stop here? Can you stop here? Social cognition. Yeah, I'll just tell you how to just look at and social cognition. Yes. So why these cognitive processes, we have been again and again talking more about it and trying to understand it more about it. So all these processes are important in our social interactions, and the more and more we know about it, it helps us to provide when there's a complex social phenomena, we can break it into segments and we can understand. So any social phenomena, as I was telling you, alcohol addiction, it is a real big challenging social problem through history. It did not just it is not just an emerging problem. Through history, alcohol addiction has become a real tough issue to handle. So any complex social phenomena, it has a numerous amount of minute and segmented internal processes that's happening. So when we understand that more and more, this helps us to understand where to touch the problem. Like for example, the root lies somewhere else. What the outward behavior is something, or the social phenomena that has come out through years, maybe a 5-year or a 10-year period, some social phenomena has raised up, but why, from where it has happened, has a very long history or a very long, the root, we have to see the root of the problem or the cause of the problem. That requires a lot of analysis, lot of introspection, and lot of research into the individual's brain. So this is what we need to understand in today's discussion, how this cognition of each individual is going to come out or impact the social phenomena. What are the aspects of cognition that are specifically social and especially human? There are certain cognitions that are very specifically social and human. If you go to the next slide, you will see something about schemas, which I already was explaining you. Schemas are the internal representation of the external reality. When I said ocean, even though you didn't see an ocean, you were able to imagine an ocean. But something like if I say Rao, can you imagine it? I'm telling you a word, Rao. What is it? Can any of us imagine what it is? Can I have somebody to respond? Have you ever heard this word, Rao? Have you ever heard it? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever heard?
On behalf of the participants, I'm giving the answer, ma'am. I haven't heard about it.
So because you have not heard, are you able to imagine something for it? But when I tell,
Not that much, ma'am.
but when I say you,
But I'm able
Ma'am, can
to
you spell it? Can you spell it?
no, that is a meaningless word. That's why you are unable to do it. But when I tell you a word chair, you can get a picture of it. Not only a picture, you
yes,
can
ma'am.
get the spelling of it, you can get the pronunciation of it, you can get the usage of it. A chair is used to
The
sit.
image and in what material it has been
So you
manufactured.
get
That way.
all these come along with that one word which I pronounced as chair. You could understand the spelling, the pronunciation, like how the shape of it, you know, the usage of it. All this comes with just the word charger, just the word chair. When I tell you chair, it comes. So this is the mental representation, the internal representation of the external reality. So whatever we have heard, whatever we have seen, whatever has acquired inside only, we can comprehend. When we have not seen anything, or when we have not heard about any, a particular thing, then the mind cannot imagine, the mind cannot think of. When you go to the next slide, you will see the word called schemas. Schemas are the internal representation of the external reality. So when we talk about social transformation, many a times we get stuck up. Where do we get stuck up is something new comes in. Either it can be a cultural, in our culture, or in our moral value, or in technology, or anything. Something new comes. I have never heard about it. And then how the brain will respond to it? When you heard the word roar, when I told that, how did our brain respond? Our brain did not know what to respond, right? It was like, oh, what is this? It was just like it didn't know what to respond at all. So this is how, when something new happens in our system, be it a cultural change, or be it some new technological invention, or be it some new rules, the government rules or something like that, or when, yeah, we are in the right time. Where, have we ever imagined in our lifetime about 6 long months of lockdown? Or have we ever imagined, yeah, in a same point of time the entire world is going to undergo the similar scenario? We have seen a lot of plagues coming in. We have seen a lot of flood or a drought coming inside the world. We have seen earthquakes. We have seen a lot of natural calamities. We have also seen a lot of diseases that kills thousands and thousands of people together. All this we have seen in the history till date in the human history. But have we ever imagined, in the same point of time, the entire planet is going to undergo a similar phenomena? This is something very new. So this particular schema was never created in our brain. So initially, if you can look back and think what happened to your own self, the first 10 to 15 days period, nobody understood nothing. It was something very odd. Even when you heard about the word corona, or the disease is spreading and all, people were unable to kind of predict, or unable to actually understand the actual situation. It was total chaos. Wasn't it so? Even the government was like stuck up. It didn't know how to respond, how to react. All this happened. Yes, maybe the political scenario and the behind the screen story we may not know, but what happened to every layman on this planet? Everybody were in confusion. Everybody did not know how to respond to this particular new scenario or new context. So because this type of a schema was not created in our brain at all from our childhood, we never read it anywhere, we did not see it in the human history so far. So the schemas are actually there within us. It starts developing our childhood onwards. So we create schemas inside our brain. Schemas are the internal representation of the external reality. So these schemas are actually determining factors for our behaviors, how we are going to respond to the situation. Any stimuli that's that's coming towards us, or in any stimuli that's in the environment, how we are going to respond to the stimuli is determined by the schematic representations inside our brain. So that is how, when you talk about the social transformation, definitely as social workers, we all know that social transformation doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't happen overnight, right? So it is a process. It is a process. So this process, how it originates, how it progresses, how it is going to be impacted, everything is determined by each of the individual in that particular society or the community. So in each individual, we all, in this entire 1 hour of discussion, what we are going to overall understand is every individual is a complex organism. Every individual's brain has innumerable complex functions that are undergoing every single minute. Every single minute, whether we are aware of it or not, so many thousands of neuronal connections are happening every single minute in our brain. Even when we are sleeping, our neuronal connections are active, it's functioning. So these neuronal connections in the brain, the neural system, is actually determining a person's life. How the person is going to think, how the person is going to respond, how the person is going to emotionally respond to the external world, how they are going to behave, how they are going to talk, how they are going to understand life. Everything is decided by our internal mechanisms, our own internal mechanisms. This is the like overall message or understanding that we are going to take back home today. And fine, understanding all of these, what are we going to do? As social workers, we need to be contributive to the society. Now we understood how society, like society in the sense a group of individuals, how the behavior, how their thinking process, how their responses are determined, or how they are impacted. We have understood about it. Now, are we having any role to impact it? Do we have any control or any mechanism or any techniques to have a control over it, or to design it, to make an impact on it? Are we having any access to design or determine the way the group of individuals are going to continue living? Are we, as individuals or as social workers, are we having any techniques or strategies in order to influence the societal growth? This is what now we have to know. Can I have few participants just to tell, like, I just want to know, are you with me? Because this virtual media, what happens, no feedback we get, no. So I'm actually not knowing, am I reaching to you or I'm somewhere else? Just one or two responses.
Yes,
Kindly unmute yourself and you can just tell hi, hello, that's all. I'm also worried whether I'm repeating things that you already know.
No, ma'am, nothing of that sort, ma'am. It's completely new to us. Except for some of the girls who have dealt with their medical and psychiatric specialization. For others, I think it's completely new, ma'am, to know about the brain's functions and all.
Okay, fine. Any participants volunteer? Can you volunteer? Just a request. If you feel like you can. Anybody, one or two. I'm sorry I couldn't come on the video. This network is not permitting.
If you're not willing to speak, you can just even put the message in the chat box.
I'm unable to hear you. Sorry. Can you repeat it once?
Asking the participants just put a message in the chat box if you're not willing to speak.
Ma'am, your voice is not audible, ma'am. Matilda, ma'am. We couldn't hear you, ma'am, clearly.
Now can you hear?
No, ma'am.
Asking the participants.
Now, madam, am I audible, madam?
Ma'am, Niranjana, ma'am, I could hear you, but I couldn't hear our HOD, my HOD's voice. Very feeble over there.
audible now, Pranita?
Okay, then maybe shall I continue, madam?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You could continue, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So just simply we are going to just few things we are just going to see, or just 5 or 10 minutes. That's all. Okay. So now, as we were talking more about the internal neural mechanisms, and we also understood that brain and the spinal cord is called the central nervous system, which is the major determinant of our functioning, all type of functioning, including the physiological function, psychological functions, and the social functions. Our central nervous system has a major determinant role in deciding our physiological, psychological, and social functioning of any individual. So as we know, brain is actually the CEO of our entire system. Brain is the CEO. So when you go to the slide, brain makes us human. Yeah, fine. So when you see in that slide, you will see the brain of many. Yeah, you see the brain of a squirrel, monkey, cat, rhesus monkey, dog, chimpanzee, and human. So when you see this brain, the different brains, you can see how complex and more organized is the human brain. Human brain has become slowly through evolution. The human brain has become more and more specialized, more and more, very complex in nature. The cat's brain is very simple. The dog's brain little more specialized because the lines or the folds that you see is more complicated there, and the chimpanzee's brain is even more better, and the human brain is much more complex and specialized. And if you see the blue area in the front, that is called the prefrontal cortex, that I was telling you, the forebrain. This area is responsible for the executive function or the cognition of a human being. As I told you, the working memory, inhibition, planning, decision making, attention ability, all these important executive functioning skills are lying on the front region of the brain. The front region of the brain is responsible for all of these functions. So there are different regions. On the next slide I will talk to you. There are different regions in the brain that's responsible for each function. If you say language function, there is a different area. The forebrain is not responsible for that. So there is a different area which will control the language function. Okay, when it comes to language, it has words, it has sounds, and it has the vocal movements, and it has script also. So in the brain, there is a particular area for each one of these. The pronunciations are handled by a particular area. The same area will not look into the meaning of that word. When I say chair, the meaning of the word chair is a different brain area is involved. The image of the chair is placed in a different brain area, and the sound pronunciation of the chair is in a different area, and the spelling of the chair is in a different brain area. So what happens, all these 4 or 5 brain areas has to integrate themselves through the neuronal connections in order for me to understand the what chair means. When I hear you tell the word chair, when you are telling me the word chair, if I have to understand the meaning of it, or if I have to comprehend that word, then all these 4 or 5 regions has to work together so that I will be able to comprehend that particular word. So this complex is our brain processes. The next slide. Yeah, the next slide, just you can see the structure of it, internal structure, how internally, see, imagine you are all sitting. So when you are, next slide, madam. Imagine you are all sitting. So now your brain is placed inside your skull, right? So inside the skull, this is how your brain is. Just imagine how it is. Inside the skull, the blue area is the major cortex area, and this colorful, the yellow, blue, it's the brain stem, and this pink color area, the purple area is the cerebellum of your brain. The next one, it's a structure of a neuron. The next slide. Next slide is the structure of a neuron. This is how a brain cell, central nervous cell, brain and the spinal cord cells are in this structure. Next slide is the neuronal connections. So there are millions of neurons. There are billions of neurons. It's estimated there are 100 billion neurons in every human brain. So these neurons connect to each other in very complex manner. Every neuron can connect to 100 other or 1,000 other neurons. So the neuronal connections are so complex, and the lights, the radiations that you see are the head of the neurons. Those are the head of the neurons. The next slide. So whatever so far we were talking about is about these neuronal connections. So these neuronal connections are the actual determinants of a human behavior. Any human behavior, whether it is a social behavior, whether it is a psychological component, or whether it is a physiological determinant, every human behavior is determined by these complex neuronal connections existing in our nervous system, the central nervous system. Okay. So now we understood that this brain is the CEO of our entire system. Okay. So yeah, next one will go. Details you may not need. Yeah, we'll learn about brain localization. As I told you, each area of the brain is in charge for a particular function. Though brain is just one single organ, next slide ma'am, though brain is just one single organ, every region, every inch or every millimeter of the brain will do a specific function. For example, if you take your hand, the little finger is controlled by one particular region, and your ring finger, the next finger, very near to your little finger, the ring finger is controlled by a different area of the brain, not the same area. So that complex is our brain's function. Every single millimeter of the brain will control or will be in charge for different function. No single area will do a single function. Yes. So every millimeter of the brain, there is so much of differentiation inside the brain. Though it is a single organ, there are a lot of differentiation. This is called brain localization. So when you talk about the personality of a person, there is a particular region in the brain, the forebrain, which controls the personality of the person. Decision making, how a person is going to make their decisions, a particular region of the brain is in charge. For example, when there is a tumor in that particular region of the brain, what happens is all other abilities will be good, but just the decision-making ability will be gone. A person who was very good in decision-making might have difficulty in making decisions after the tumor has come. Have you seen people like that? Like when there are people who have undergone brain injuries, when they have undergone brain surgery, or when there is a tumor and all, or when there is a blood clot in the brain. What happens, wherever the blood clot is, that particular area, what function that particular area does, that particular function alone gets affected. For some people, when they get stroke, they may lose their speech. Their voice will go off, their speech will be gone. But otherwise, they can move their hands, they can walk around, they can plan, they can talk. They can't talk, but they can do all other work very efficiently. So like that, for every area of our behavior, there is a particular region in the brain. So personality, there is a particular region, decision making, memory, emotions. There are emotions area is called the amygdala, which is in the center of the brain. That particular small organ, it is the size of the organ is just like an almond seed. Hope you all know what's an almond seed, right? Hello, somebody respond. Okay, that particular region is responsible for the emotion, the planning ability, and the movement. Every other function has a particular area. So these are lobes of the brain, or which you might be already knowing. We'll go to the next. Just for you to have a glance, what are the how the brain looks like for people who don't know. Just to have a glance, I included these pictures. We'll move on. We can scroll on. This is how your brain looks, the internal area of the brain, how it looks, you can see. The next one is, we can scroll on. Yeah. Next. Yeah. Yes. Next. Behavioral change using brain plasticity. Yeah. Yes, this is the higher level thinking ability. Yeah, exactly. If we have to talk in neurological terms, then cognitive ability includes all of these: attention, abstract thinking, judgment, personality, planning, decision making, cognitive flexibility, and working memory. These are the cognitive functions where if you have to talk in a neurological terminologies are these. When you say the word cognition, you mean all, you actually refer to all of these functions: working memory, cognitive flexibility, decision making, planning, personality, judgment, abstract thinking, and attention. All these put together is cognition. And as social workers, definitely you will be able to relate with it, right? Whenever we deal with people, whenever we deal with social issues, whenever we deal with our own selves, whenever we deal with our family, wherever we are, we look into all of these basic functions. So it's very essential as social workers, we need to know about these higher level thinking abilities. With, the brain is the overall authority for all these abilities. Next one, madam, behavioral change using brain plasticity. Yeah. Now, how are we going to impact the behavioral change? So, as we were discussing, this neuronal connections, the neuronal connections has the ability to either eliminate itself or to form new connections. For example, when you see this old age, in old age, what happens is many skills people start losing, right? Those who are very good in calculations, when they come to 70-year-old, 80-year-old, they will not be able to do those mental calculations as fast as they did. And certain other things like people who are really very good in cooking, slowly what happens, the taste of their cooking gradually deteriorates. As their age increases, it gradually comes down. And people who are very, very fast in walking, as age increases, what happens, we see them, they can't move around so fast and all. But at the same time, we see certain people, like even in their 70s or 75 age old, they keep walking fast, they are so active, they are able to do the same thing which they did when they were 50-year-old or 40-year-old. Definitely we would have come across such people. Yes, what is that difference? Why is it happening? It's because the more and more you keep using repeatedly a function, that area of the brain, when you more and more use calculations, that particular area of the brain, the neuronal connection gets more and more strengthened. When you don't use that particular area for a long time, the neuronal connections there thinks that, oh, these connections are not necessary at all because it's not used, so what happens, the neuronal connections gets to deplete. The neuronal connections deplete and it gets eliminated. So what happens when the neurons are not connected to one another, the function also fades away. The function fades away. So the more and more you use a function, the more and more the function gets strengthened and the person will be very good in that particular function. So this is called brain plasticity. The brain has an ability to improve itself, to mold itself, to change itself at any point of time in life. So it's not that we would have heard like when you get old, it's very difficult for you to learn a new skill. Maybe it might take a little more time, but repeated practice, what happens, the neuronal connections get stronger and the person will be able to learn the new skill. So brain plasticity is something very, very helpful for us to create, to inculcate new behaviors in people, and this flexibility of the brain. The flexibility of the brain is very, very kind of very advantageous state where we can use it for people's improvement, for our like whoever has difficulty in certain areas, when many type of, like, even in our clinical experience, we see people coming with young adolescents or young adults, sometimes even married people, sometimes children, and even people who are in the retirement age. We see people coming with very simple issues, like they say, we are not able to focus on a particular thing for a longer time. I get easily distracted, and thereby I create a lot of problems in my life. So if only I can create, I can develop my attention ability. If only if I can concentrate for a more period of time, like 10 minutes, if I can concentrate on a particular work, if I can focus more, then my life will be wonderful. But I am unable to do it. This is the very common problem we face these days. So what, as long as you have heard about the brain functioning, now you will be able to identify what you have to do, right? So this attention deficiency, from which area of the brain is responsible for it? Can anybody tell me? Attention, is it a cognitive function? Is it a cognitive function? Somebody? Somebody respond. You can even respond in the text. Nobody? Okay. Yeah, it is a cognitive function. Thank you. Fine. So which area of the brain is responsible for this attention? Attention ability of a human being. Which area of the brain is responsible? The forebrain? Why no responses? The prefrontal area, the forebrain that we were talking about, right? That is the place where this attention ability is processed. Yes. So now there is a problem. I told you the person comes with a difficulty for attention ability. So in what way can we help them? In what way can we help them? Yes. There are certain tasks for us to help them. Yes. So as I told you, yeah, practice attention, exactly. So how do we practice attention is what we have to know. It is not that by sometimes what we do is we tell them, no, see, all these years you have been so productive, you were able to do amazing work, you are so good in your life and all. So why not you make an effort to give attention? Why not you make yourself know, like we try to help them with a lot of self-development or self-help strategies. These self-help strategies are needed only for people who lack motivation. But these people, they have motivation, but they are unable to give attention at all. So what does that mean? It means there is an inability in the internal system. So we need to practice, help them practice. So we can give them like attention task, like they can they can do a lot of wheat sorting or grain sorting. For example, if you have seen in your childhood at home, what whenever you get the cereals and pulses and all, there will be some weeds in that, right? So what your mom does, they spend lot of time. They spend lot of time to remove all those weeds. So it might take even half an hour time. In that half an hour time, their entire focus is on the work. Yes, it's a very simple task, but actually it's a very powerful attention task. This task is now given for people who undergo brain surgeries. When people undergo brain injury, their attention ability gradually decreases, and also for psychiatric illnesses, no, when they undergo long-term psychiatric illnesses and all, their attention ability gradually decreases. Not only psychiatric illnesses, when people are under long-term stress, more and more of stress, what happens? Gradually our attention ability decreases. So what we need to do, like how physical fitness and all we do, no, like every day we do some exercise or yoga and all, like that we also have to, whoever we are, including me, we have to do some attentional tasks on a regular basis in our lifestyle, in our everyday life. We should adapt it as our lifestyle. We need to do a lot of attention tasks. So these tasks help us to strengthen our neuronal connections in that particular forebrain area which is responsible for attention. Then what happens? This attention ability helps you to perform very well in all the domains of your life. Even your interpersonal relationships get better, your work performance gets better, your emotional balance gets better. Emotional balance is very important. In these days, in this fast moving scenario, the emotional health of individuals are really under a big question. So our emotional balance gets better when our attention ability is very effective. So when our neuronal connections get strengthened in this particular brain area, our attention ability increases, our entire life becomes better. It's a very, very, very simple reason why many of us actually are suffering in life, because due to stress our thinking gets affected. Due to thinking, our even like day-to-day activities we are unable to plan, or we are unable to organize ourselves better, and that will impact on our interpersonal relationships, family relationships, and that will impact on our work performance, and that will give us a little more dissatisfaction in life. When you are dissatisfied, you are unhappy. When you are unhappy, your emotional state gets disturbed, and when your emotional state gets disturbed, again your attention gets decreased. So it's a kind of vicious cycle that we are all into. Irrespective of who we are all into this type of a vicious cycle in this present scenario, in this fast growing technological world. So it's very much good that we ourselves also follow attention tasks on a regular basis, and we also help people know about it. We can give awareness to them, and we help them to also do more of attention tasks. It's not only for attention tasks, all cognitive functions. For example, cognitive flexibility. As I told you, there's task switching. We need to help them to adapt to new environments. Task switching is you plan for the day and come. You plan 11 o'clock, I'm going to kind of what you say, I'm going to start cooking. 11:30, I'm going to finish my cooking. 11:30, I'm going to start listening to music on this particular TV channel. This is what you have planned. And for due to some reason, there is no electricity on that day. That's a power shutdown in your house. How many of us will be very happy to accept it? How many of us will be disappointed to accept it? And how many of us will be really irritated to accept it? All these are different intensities. Whether we are happy or we are irritated or we are angry or we are disappointed. All these are it varies in the intensity. So that is how the task switching is important. Once planned, certain people cannot change the schedule at all. They can't fit with new change of schedule or new assignments or new adaptation to be made in life. Maybe they get transferred and they go to a different district, or they go to a different state where the entire climate is different, or they move on to a different country where the entire everything is different. So people who have difficulty in this task switching area of the brain, they will have adjustmental difficulty, not only in their environment, also in their interpersonal relationship, and also in their personal life routines. They can't be flexible in their cognitive ability. So these are small, very, very subtle functions that is in the brain, which are very essential and very important for our everyday quality of life. So this is what I was wanting to share with you. So when we have...
Ma'am, Niranjana ma'am, due to short of time, I think we shall take up some questions, ma'am. We have a question from Dr. Atul. Dr. Atul is the Assistant Professor of the PG Department of Social Work of SDM PG Center of Karnataka. So he has asked a question whether you could list the activities which could help the cognitive development of children. So yes, ma'am. He has asked.
Sorry.
He has asked a list of activities which could develop, which could help the cognitive development of children now.
Basically, when we talk about cognition, it starts with attention, then with working memory, and then with flexibility, the cognitive flexibility. For children, these three is very essential. Followed by that is the decision making, planning, and other aspects of the cognitive abilities that we have been discussing. So initially, when it comes to attention task, you can give them a paper pencil task like letter cancellation or number cancellation task. You can also give them color cancellation task. All these will have, for example, you can take a newspaper, or any book, any story book or something, where in English or in their own local language. So what we ask them to do is we give them a particular letter. For example, if it's an English storybook, we give them the letter E. Any letter which will be frequently repeated. For example, T, R, or these letters repeat often. So we give them per day, we give them one letter. So I give the book to the child and I tell them this one page you have to do it, and I tell them you have to cancel the letter E on this page. So what they have to do is they have to go line by line, and wherever E, the letter E is seen, they have to cancel it. Just strike it over. And we note down the time, how much time they take to finish that particular page and how many errors they make. So when we give this task on a regular basis for a month or 2 months or 3 months, we will see gradually the speed increases and the error decreases, which means attention is improving. That is one task. Another task is grain sorting. We can take the cereal pulses in the like in your grocery, maybe like it should be of similar size, like I don't get the name of it. For example, the fenugreek and the rice, it is more or less the similar size. So you can mix both, like 20 each. You take, mix it in a bowl, give it to them and ask them to separate. For children, it's a very good task because they have to sit, they have to, like, actually even their fine motor ability gets developed because they have to, it's very small, so they have to slowly separate both, and they might minimum take 10 minutes to do it. That 10 minutes of every day, 10 minutes of attention task will drastically do improve their ability, attention ability to a major extent. So how do we see this attention ability development in their day-to-day activities is they will start focusing more on their academics. They will, whenever you talk, they will be able to listen more better. Many times when we talk to children, they only hear half the matter what we talk. So the other half, the actual point what we try to convey them, they may not listen. So in all these aspects, we will gradually see a drastic change in their behavior. So one, as I told you, brain sorting task you can give, attention task you can give, and letter cancellation task you can give, and we can also ask them to sometimes like if they are a little bit like 10-year or 11-year kids, then you can give them some bead work where they can string the beads, they can do some embroidery, or they can do some stitching work, because all these needs minute attention. Like they have to focus on a very minute thing for a longer time. So these type of everyday, only thing is we have to give them on a very, very normal day-to-day household activities that will actually make the children to become more interested in doing it. And attention, and then as I told you, for cognitive flexibility, you can give them like, for example, we used to play games like when I say 1, you have to stand. When I say 2, you have to sit. When I say, so you keep you keep it repeating fast, right? You say 2, 1, 2, then again 2, then you say 1, 2. So what they have to do is they have to accordingly do the task. So it means like they're shifting. They shifting there. So all our traditional games actually involves executive functioning aspects. Like every of our, all type of traditional games has any one component of the executive functioning. So it's better we engage children more and more in play activities. More and more of play will create healthy individuals into the society. The more they play in their childhood, they become healthy adults in their life. So kind of cognitive development is good, emotional development becomes adequate, and even their moral development is, because it will get strengthened. So there are rules in when they play, and they have to stick on to the rules. They can't cheat the other person. They should do justice to the group. They have to abide by the rules. All these self-disciplinary activities and these moral value development, all of it happens when the child engages more and more in the play activities. So more and more play during childhood will create a healthy society and very healthy, enriching life for the particular person throughout their lifespan.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Participants, you could just unmute and you could ask your question directly to our resource person, or you could also put it in the chat box. We have 5 minutes more to end our session. Meanwhile, ma'am, there is a question from Yuvashri. She is from 2nd MSW. Since she has lost the connection, she has texted me the question, ma'am. So it is about, as a social worker, how can I improve my social cognition to understand the issues of the society? So she has asked about how she could improve the social cognition so as to understand the issues which is prevailing in the society, ma'am.
Yeah, social cognition, as I was telling you, it is all to do about with our schemas. So when I have never heard about what gay marriages are. Will I be able to do something regarding it? When you see when you work with a community, you see there are lot of people who engage in that type of relationship. Then what happens is we ourselves are in a inadequate state, like we don't know what to do. So we have to strengthen our schemas. More and more we know about the social reality. More and more we learn about the social reality. More and more we learn about a lot of concepts. More and more we read, like for example, you get to know the recent legislations that are supporting gay marriages, and what is the current scenario in the social system. All this will create a schema inside your brain. So this cognition helps you to better react to the reality. When there is a chaos around you, when your cognition is better, you can really respond in a resourceful state. You will be resourceful in handling the particular phenomena or the particular group of people or any society or community. So social cognition is something to do with schemas. Our own internal schema. It is about our own internal schema. Schema also includes attitudes. What attitude do I have? What is my attitude about gender? What is my attitude about life? Am I happy with my own gender? For example, we see many people, female gender, they are really upset with themselves. They like to be, they like to take the role of a male gender, and we see many boys and men, they like to take the role of a feminine gender. Normally, not to talk about transgenders, but normally, like even in our families, we ourselves might have seen people, or in our own families we would have seen. So what is my gender idea? Whether am I accepting my own gender? What is my attitude towards gender? All these are determinants of your social cognition. So the more and more your schema gets strengthened, the more and more you become productive and helpful to the people around you. anybody for that matter, may it be a group, society, or may it be a friend, anybody. So social workers, I would suggest, we have to start forming healthy schemas. We need to create more and more of schemas. Not only knowledge, but also attitude.
That's nice, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Participants, do you have any other questions? I could share the details of our resource person so that you could also contact ma'am. She'll be happily helping you out in your understanding towards the schemas and other relative functions. And she is also the director of Kondatam, an organization which is offering psychological services, and it is also involved in research. So you could also very well use the expertise of our resource person. So I think we have come to the end of our session. It's my honor to thank our dear resource person for our contribution in making us to understand the cognitive and executive functions of the brain with real-time examples. Thank you so much, ma'am, and we are very happy to collaborate with you. Now I request our HOD, Dr. Matilda, Department of Social Work, Kaveri College for Women, Tiruchirappalli, to give our concluding remarks. Over to ma'am.
Good afternoon. One and join here for the webinar. It is a very wonderful presentation, ma'am. It was informative and educative, and it was meticulously planned by the resource person. I'm very happy about the topic of this webinar today. I appreciate Dr. Amrita for taking up this initiative of bringing the wonderful person for our college, and also the topic of today's program. This is the need of the hour. I felt because we are in the age of social transformation, and how cognitive process that is more related with the social transformation. And it was meticulously planned, and I was also very much impressed about the way the resource person taken the session, starting from giving an introduction about cognition, definition of it, and how the family plays an important role, vital role in forming the behavior of the child, and all the forming the cognitive process, cognition of the child. And also she talked about the milestones the child undergoes. Even I heard that even before the child is born, the child's personality is formed in the mother's womb. The child is when the child is in the mother's womb. And also she talked about the new area of executive functioning, which is involved in the cognition, and how it helps people in decision making, problem solving, self-regulation, self-activation, self-realization, self-determination. And also it was very good to see the graph, how it shows the cognition when it starts in the childhood, when the child is at the age, and how it declines when the aging process, as the person gets old, then it declines. And also the values, it has to be inculcated, especially this program